Good evening, this is Shay Gibson with Wind Alert and Weather Flow. This is the Tropics update for Wednesday, May the 25th. It's about 10 o'clock p.m. and we're looking at an area of disturbance lifting towards the Bahamas known as Invest 91L. It was given that this morning at 8:15 by the National Hurricane Center, given a 10% chance of development in the next 48 hours and a 50% chance of development in the next 5 days. Now, here at 7:40 p.m. tonight, the National Hurricane Center came on a few minutes early, and they're giving this area a 30% chance in the next 48 hours and a 60% chance in the next 5 days. So the chances have increased today, and what it simply means is that the area will be moving into an environment more conducive for development. It doesn't necessarily mean it will acquire a name, but if it does, it would be Bonnie. If you remember, Alex was already named on January the 13th and 14th this year when it became Hurricane Alex over the Azores Islands. So we'll be watching very closely. This one could be of tropical or subtropical status depending on a few factors. We just don't know yet. We're keeping an eye on it. Nothing's for certain. The models are not for certain right now, especially the spaghetti plots and some of the other guidances for tracks. It has not developed into a solid closed low yet, and we can't really get an idea of where it's going to go until we get an actual center of rotation for a system, and also for depression makes it a little bit easier to find out what the track is going to be. So let's go ahead and take a look at Datascope, our Datascope viewer from WeatherFlow, and right now we've moved from the high resolution satellite into the infrared because we just can't see it at nighttime. But what it looks like is an area very disorganized with upper level shear and upper level clouding going across the area right now. The actual low level circulation is right down here underneath the clouding that you can't see right now. You could see it was a lot more pronounced earlier, and what we have is you see a little bit of a band right there, and you see some convection is trying to get around underneath. There's an upper trough that's driving down from the Gulf across Cuba and Dominican Republic and then up over this area. So we have some upper level shear going on. This area is expected to move in this direction out of that environment, and so all of this area here is a lot more relaxed on the upper shear aloft. So it means it'll have some warmer waters and less upper level shear aloft to tear the cloud tops off of it and allow for higher vertical stacking of those thunderstorms that try to wrap around the center. So right now what we have is just some disorganized upper level shear and some convective feed trying to come up from the south along out of the monsoonal trough and get wrapped around it. And that's all we have for right now. So let's take a look at the latest tracks, multi-model guidances, and some of these are already starting to show southeast North Carolina guidance, and that's due to a Bermuda High development that's going to be coming pretty soon. We'll get into that in just a second. But also, let's take a look at the GEFS ensemble here, and we can see that those model track guidances still bring this into South Carolina. So we're already seeing a little bit of a disagreement in some of these spaghetti models, and that's why I don't like to pay too much attention to them. I'm just showing it for general guidance on what they're showing as an approach to the southeast region to be on the alert for. The intensity guidance for this, earlier the models were showing mostly weak low pressure, and now we're starting to see a little bit more agreement for a weak tropical system. So we don't know if it's going to be subtropical or tropical yet, but we are getting a couple more models on board with making this a weak tropical storm or a subtropical storm, as some of the other ones do keep it a weak low or possibly even depression. So we'll have to keep watching. Here's our sea surface temperatures. As you can see, the Gulf Stream pulling up, very distinct in this. This is a Sport SST from NASA, and you can see the cooler shelf waters. This is going to have a big role to play with this system as these cooler shelf waters wrap around as the low comes up. So we'll be watching that as well. The center of this is about 84 to 86 degrees, so it's primed for convection along it. So if we get any slowing or stalling over the Gulf Stream, this is where the system could pick up some momentum. Looking at the cooler shelf water temperatures for the Charleston area, we have 76.6 degrees at Charleston. Myrtle Beach showing 74.8 degrees. Savannah is showing 76.5 degrees. So the waters are still cool. Ideally, 82.4 degrees or 28 degrees Celsius would be the most conducive for convective activity for a tropical system. So we're still a little bit on the cool side. It's not entirely out of the question. We've had many subtropical storms develop off our coastline even with these cooler waters. But the Gulf Stream out here is what's really going to help fuel this system from the surface. So we take a look at the earth.nolschool.net map. This is one of my favorite things to look at. We can get an idea of the surface, mid, and upper level winds all at one time. And right now, let me go back to the surface here. That looks a little bit disorganized. And this is where the center of circulation is right now. It looks like it's starting to close off. It's more of a positively tilted trough with a little bit of feed coming around it, so it's almost to a closed low status. It's getting kind of close to that, and we'll see what happens overnight. So this is what's going on right now. Also, we have this high pressure, this Atlantic high pressure, which was giving us our southeast or south-southeast sea breeze today. This will be wobbling off to the east and actually becoming more positioned over Bermuda as a Bermuda high and becoming a little bit more robust. So right now where it's at about 1,017 millibars, we might be building that out to 1,025 millibars as mid-level high pressure, and this will help for steering with the clockwise, not counterclockwise, but clockwise directions going around the high pressure. And this is going to be one of the main steering mechanisms for this low up the coastline. We also have, if we look a little higher up, at 18,000 feet, this is 500 HPA or 500 millibars. We see that earlier this environment at this height, the winds were stronger. Now they're starting to relax at 18,000 feet. And what we have here is we have a mid to upper level low. We also have this high pressure here. This is creating what's called a Rex block. So it's almost like this figure eight kind of a situation. When this high moves out in this direction, this low has an avenue to travel around this upper level vorticity. And we'll take a look at the 250 millibar and get a better idea of what that's going to do. So here comes the 250. And you can see this upper level shear coming across the top of this surface rotation that's trying to develop. And what that does is it tears the cloud tops off of thunderstorms trying to develop in those clouds building really high from thunderstorm activity. When that happens, it limits vertical stacking, and it really just sort of caps the ability for the storm to be able to get convection wrapped around it and be successful at becoming a stronger low, because it just can't deepen in convection and it can't get the storming available. But you see this upper level vortex right here and what kind of steering mechanism that could be once the cloud tops do start to build. This area is going to be moving over here into a less shear environment, and you can see right here these winds are about 40 to 50 knots going over the top of this thing, so it's blowing the cloud tops right off. But as it travels in this direction, it gets sort of in this area where there's just a relaxed environment, and it's right over the Gulf Stream, so those warm waters may be able to help fuel it, and that's why I'm sure that the National Hurricane Center is giving this a higher chance for development, simply because warm waters, less shear, and central low pressure or closed low pressure, and you have a recipe for some tropical system development. So here we go with I'm going to go back to the GFS here. I'm going to run the GFS model. Let me pick this one back out to 6. Now this is the 6 o'clock run from today, and let's run this model, and you can see where this low starts to come together. Watch this high pressure over here. You see it growing at 1,025 millibars as a Bermuda high and steering this into the coastline. So the GFS brings this into the South Carolina coast, stalls it, and then drops it south, and that has a lot to do with high pressure building over the Appalachian Mountains, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But just keep that in mind as we go forward, because the Euro is showing that as well. GFS keeps this hugged down along the Florida-Georgia coast, and eventually it ends up being ripped apart over land. But that's just one of the model guidances, and the GFS has been pretty consistent on this the last several runs, so it's definitely something to watch. Here's the Euro model as we go out to 168 hours. I want to back off a little bit and go back to Sunday again, where we show the low pressure off the coastline, the Euro following in agreement with the GFS. And notice this high pressure here in the Appalachian Mountains. So what happens with that is we get a high ridge built over the mountains, and we get sinking air, dry air, coming down along the northwest and western side of the low pressure that tends to dry out that side of the storm. And we've seen this before many times, where this whole western side of the storm is completely dry, and we have a northeast wind along the coastline, and then most of that rain is actually in northern South Carolina to southeast North Carolina, where coupled with that upper trough, we could see more or less an atmospheric river develop over North Carolina and Virginia, and most of that rainfall would be in this area versus our area. So we'll be watching that as well. I'm going to take a peek at the mesoscale models for the NAM 12 kilometer. And that one's trying to run the midnight ones already, because it's late at night, 10 o'clock. They're trying to initialize at this point. And I'm going to bring this back down to mean sea level pressure. and you can see here on Sunday that it brings the low actually towards northern Florida. So the North American model and the GFS sort of have this low a little further south. The Euro brings it a little further north into South Carolina, and models continue to update. So nothing's for certain, especially when we talk about modeling for days out. 24 to 48 hours, they do pretty well, but then when you get beyond that, a lot of errors occur. So we expect the track to change, and especially without an actual center of low pressure or central closed low pressure, we don't truly know the nature of it. So expect things to change, and I wouldn't be expecting anything strong. If anything, it looks like a very weak subtropical or tropical storm, possibly a depression, or even just a low pressure by the time it gets here. It just depends on many factors. When we get those cooler shelf waters and that drier air along the northwest and western side, that may weaken the storm simply to a low pressure along the coast, if not to our north. So that will do it for the tropical update for tonight, and I'll be back on tomorrow. I'll try to get back on tomorrow afternoon, or you'll see me posting in Twitter or Facebook about it. But until then, take care and thanks for watching, and I'll be back on soon.